Rome, a city choking on smoke, its skies glowing hell red, its people screaming as rooftops collapse. And where's the emperor? Not rushing to save his people, not leading soldiers with fire buckets. No, Nero is center stage, lyre in hand, belting out his own soundtrack to destruction. Imagine your house burning while your landlord shows up with a karaoke machine. That was Rome in 64 CE. Nero wasn't just a tyrant, he was history's most unhinged performer. His death would be no noble tragedy. It would be a farce, a grotesque opera where the star refused to leave the stage. The Great Fire and the Blame Game. It began with sparks in the night, flames licking through Rome's tightly packed wooden homes like a ravenous beast. Within hours, the city was a furnace. Men, women, children, and whole families were incinerated in their sleep. Livestock ran screaming through the streets, temples collapsed into embers, and 7 nights later, 2/3 of the city lay in ruin. And in the middle of this chaos, Nero, not hauling buckets of water, not organizing rescue. Instead, witnesses claimed he climbed to a rooftop, plucked his lyre, and howled about the burning of Troy. It wasn't just tone deaf, it was a pyromaniac's dream concert. When the ashes settled, Romans wanted blood. Who had lit the match? The whispers turned ugly, pointing at Nero himself. So the emperor did what every guilty man does. He found scapegoats. Enter the Christians, a strange fringe cult despised by most. Nero unleashed horrors on them straight from a sadist's imagination. Crucifixions, bodies sewn into animal skins and mauled by dogs. Human torches set ablaze in his gardens for evening ambience. Rome burned, but Christians roasted. And as screams filled the night, Nero strutted like a showman convinced the crowd might still cheer. The golden palace of insanity. When the flames finally died, Rome's citizens expected rebuilding, relief, maybe even a shred of remorse. Instead, Nero unveiled his true masterpiece, the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. Imagine this. Your family's home is reduced to ashes, and on the same ground rises a sprawling pleasure palace coated in marble and dripping in gold leaf. Its centerpiece, a colossal statue of Nero himself, towering like a god staring down at the mortals he'd just displaced. Subtlety was not his strong suit. Inside, the madness only deepened. Ceilings sprinkled guests with rose petals until they suffocated. Dining rooms rotated endlessly, powered by the sweat of slaves, just so the emperor could enjoy his banquets from every angle, and perfumes rained from hidden pipes, soaking visitors until they gagged. It wasn't a palace, it was Las Vegas, designed by a narcissist with a death wish. The public hated it. Taxpayers footed the bill while they still squatted in ruins, staring at the emperor's disco palace. And the bitter punchline? This grand vanity project, meant to immortalize Nero's genius, only immortalized his insanity. The golden house glittered like a jewel, but it gleamed brightest as a neon sign flashing. This guy has lost it. The performer-in-chief. If you thought the palace was indulgent, wait until you hear about Nero's real obsession performing. Not leading armies, not governing Rome. No, Nero wanted to be adored like a rock star. He forced senators, generals, and even hardened soldiers to sit through his endless stage shows. Picture Rome's most powerful men, grizzled veterans of war trapped in a theater, while Nero screeched through tragedies, his voice cracking like a teenager's. Leaving wasn't an option. The doors were locked. Audience members faked fainting, pretended to die, or bribed guards just to escape. His ego knew no limits. He entered chariot races and conveniently always won. He competed in singing contests across Greece where shockingly he also always won. The man treated politics like a side gig. His real empire was the stage, and the cruel irony, everyone hated his performances. They clapped, they cheered, but only because they were terrified of what would happen if they didn't. Nero thought he was rewriting history as the emperor-artist, a cultural god. Instead, he turned Rome's Senate into hostages in a karaoke nightmare. And the curtain was only just rising while outside the theater, rebellion was beginning to brew. The revolts begin. While Nero drowned Rome in his tone-deaf ballads, the empire began to crack at its foundations. In Gaul, the governor Julius Vindex raised the banner of revolt. In Spain, Galba, another ambitious general, declared open rebellion. Legions once sworn to Nero now marched under new names, new oaths. Rome's heart beat to the sound of marching boots, and none of them were coming to defend him. The Senate began whispering, those same senators who once clapped until their palms bled at his dreadful recitals. In the streets, gossip became prophecies. The emperor's days were numbered. And what did Nero do? Rally his armies? Reinforce his defenses? No, He wrote a song about betrayal, convinced that poetry could outpace spears. The empire slipped like sand through his fingers, and still he rehearsed lines for a tragedy. The rebels weren't buying tickets, they were sharpening swords. The stage lights dimmed, and for the first time, Nero realized the theatre doors were closing on him. Deserted by the Praetorian Guard, even mad emperors sleep better with bodyguards. Nero had the Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers sworn to defend him at all costs. They were supposed to be his iron wall, his final line of defense. But loyalty in Rome was always for sale, and Nero's treasury was bleeding. When word spread that the Senate was turning against him, his Praetorians didn't form up in defense. They cashed their last bribes and vanished. Imagine the president waking up to find the Secret Service already on LinkedIn. That was Nero, wandering through the palace, begging guards not to abandon him, promising riches he no longer had. These were the same men who once dragged nobles to execution at his command. Now they wouldn't even fetch him a horse. His palace echoed with silence, corridors that once hummed with soldiers' boots now cold and empty. The emperor who set Christians aflame couldn't light a spark of loyalty in his own guards, and as the empire moved on without him, Nero was left with the worst role of all, playing the part of a king with no kingdom. The flight into the night stripped of guards, abandoned by allies, Nero became what he most feared, a man without an audience. Cloaked like a runaway slave, the emperor of Rome slipped into the shadows. No chariots, no triumphal fanfare, just a pitiful figure sneaking out of the city he once ruled. He stumbled through fields and graveyards, clutching at bushes, muttering that the world had betrayed a genius. Each footstep dragged him further from the marble palaces he built, further from the throne he thought eternal. He begged friends for shelter, but doors closed fast when Nero came knocking. Finally, a freedman, one of the lowest in Roman society, took him in. There, in a shabby villa, the emperor who had once demanded rose petals rain from ceilings now hid among vermin, whining about how posterity would never understand his brilliance. Rome buzzed with rumor. The emperor was gone, vanished into the night. It was the greatest disappearing act in imperial history, but unlike his staged performances, there were no standing ovations, only whispers that the curtain had finally dropped on the mad performer. The coward's death by dawn, Nero's world had collapsed into silence. The Senate had branded him a public enemy, Rome celebrated his downfall, and the only stage left was the shabby room where he hid. The emperor who once played God now trembled like a condemned criminal. He begged his companions to kill him, but none dared stain their hands. So Nero, history's self-proclaimed great artist, was left fumbling with a dagger, staring at his reflection one last time. But courage wasn't in his script. He pressed the blade to his throat, shaking, unable to follow through. "What an artist dies in me," he whimpered, the final words of a man who mistook tyranny for theatre. At last, a loyal freedman shoved the blade home, ending the performance with a messy, undignified encore. Nero collapsed, blood pooling on the floor, not to applause, but to silence. Rome's last Julio-Claudian emperor didn't fall in battle, didn't face lions, didn't even get a heroic death scene. He went out like a failed actor booted off stage, begging the crowd for one more song, and for the first time, no one clapped. So ended Emperor Nero, not with a blaze of glory, but with a whimper and a bad punchline. He left behind a bankrupt empire, a charred capital, and a reputation fit for every worst ruler list in history. Rome tried to erase his memory, yet his name still echoes like a bad song you can't get out of your head. Maybe that was Nero's last trick, immortality through infamy. After all, some emperors build empires. Nero just burned his and then tried to sing about it.